We're trying to build a future where people can apply their creative ideas, turn them into growth campaigns almost instantly, and let salespeople focus on building like deep human relationships. One example for one of our customers, they improved their data quality from 30% to 80%. And then we let you basically have LLMs on top of that, not only to like clean the data, but also to find new data points. These claygencies, some of them are making more than $2 million a year, by the way. I mean, Usman, this is like a real money-making opportunity to start a claygency that no one is talking about.
Hello and welcome to 1 to 100, a podcast that takes you inside the most promising hypergrowth startups in a conversation with the founders themselves at the helm. Our goal is to give you the inside story alongside empirical analysis of a notable tech company that you might want to join. I'm your host, Usman Hanif, the author of the Why You Should Join newsletter. This week's 1 to 100 is all about Clay.
Well, for those tuned in, thank you so much. Welcome to 1 to 100, where we explore hypergrowth startups worth joining with the founders of those companies. My name is Usman. I'm one of the authors of Why You Should Join and the host of the podcast. Today's company is Clay. Clay is a creative go-to-market platform which helps users find their target audience, enrich lead data, and automate personalized outreach at scale. They've 10x'd revenue each of the past 2 years and now count major companies like Anthropic, Notion, Verkada, Ramp, Vanta, and Intercom as customers. Clay has about 50 full-time employees, is super well funded, and actively hiring software engineers and designers in New York City. I'm super excited to be chatting with Varun Anand, the company's co-founder and head of operations. Varun, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Usman. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive right into it. Clay has 100x revenue in the past 2 years. Clearly, you guys have built something that people want. So for the listeners that are maybe unfamiliar with what that is, I'd love for you to kind of give the spiel of what is Clay's product and how exactly are people using it today?
Yeah, so we basically help businesses grow. And the main way to grow a business is to find customers that actually care about what you're selling. And so to do that, you need to do deep customer research. And today that's manual, it's expensive, and doesn't always even get you the right information. And we kind of fix all of that. So let me kind of tell you how it works. There's basically two pieces to this. The first piece is data, because you need data in order to know who to reach out to. And how does this work right now? Well, there are large data providers that people will buy data from. And usually they have to buy it from multiple of these providers. And it's expensive, the data quality is middling, and they have to manage lots of different contracts. That doesn't usually leave people in a very happy state. So we help with that because we aggregate all the different data providers that exist. We put them into one place in like a credit-based marketplace, so you don't have to manage different vendors. And then most importantly, we let you combine them. And so you can maximize your data quality. So in one example, for one of our customers, they improved their data quality from 30% to 80%. And then we let you basically have LLMs on top of that, not only to like clean the data, but also to find new data points. So for example, one of our customers is Vanta. You can imagine that Vanta probably wants to know which of its customers or prospective customers are SOC 2 compliant or not. Now, in order to get that type of information, previously you'd have to have salespeople go out, check their website, and look for that type of information. Now you can use our AI agent called Claygent, and it can go out to websites and figure out if it's SOC 2 compliant. So that's kind of the first piece, which is getting the data. Once you have that data, you can use Clay to scale your outreach and basically send hyper-personalized, high-quality messages to every single prospect. And that can basically centralize a lot of the work that is previously distributed to lots of sales reps into a small growth and RevOps team to get pretty significant efficiency gains.
So obviously simplifying a bit here, but sort of the two core tenets are one, being able to get data. And so that's aggregating across many different sources and then also enriching that data. And there seems to be a lot of cool technology there that we'll dive into. And then two is once you've gotten this lead data, have enriched it a bit, you can do a whole lot of downstream tasks with it. Again, a lot of cool technology. Is that kind of a good understanding of the product? Yeah. And so you mentioned Vanta. You guys also, host a couple other pretty big ticket customers as well. Now, I'm no expert in sales prospecting. I've obviously done some of it. I know there's companies out there that at least do part of this, right? Apollo, ZoomInfo, Rocket Reach, etc. but these customers are choosing you. What do you think it is that Clay offers that's just 10x better, that you've been able to get all these people signed up and using Clay and not these other solutions?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the type of customer, because what makes a 10x better for Anthropic or Intercom is not what makes a 10x better for an SMB or a marketing agency or a startup. And so we have a self-serve motion where we have thousands of paying customers, and a lot of those are just small businesses or early stage startups. And so let me go into why maybe it's a 10x better solution for them, and then we can go into the bigger companies. So for the smaller businesses, let's just, I mean, you have a small business actually. It's this podcast and this newsletter, right? So maybe we can talk about you. I could imagine that you probably want to know who your listeners are, who's reading your newsletter every week, right? And you could use that information to maybe get better sponsorship deals or to reach out to them for other things. What are your options? Well, your options aren't great, Usman. Your options are quite bleak, actually, because all the data providers that you could use to enrich all the information usually will require like a sales-led motion. You have to sign a contract. Maybe it's annual commitment. That's going to be pretty expensive. It's definitely not usage-based. Even if you were to go through that hassle, and maybe there is one usage-based thing, you're still limited to one provider. You could instead pay a couple $100s for a Clay subscription, month to month, by the way. Put your newsletter subscriber list in it, automatically enrich it to figure out who these people are, and you would just pay a couple $100, your task would be done, and you probably would have had a delightful user experience along the way. Now, that's just the data piece. Now, you probably want to do something with this information, right? You probably want to email these people. You want to reach out to them on LinkedIn, maybe. You want to enrich them and figure out, like, what seniorities they might be. And so Clay can then take that information and you can automate messaging them in different ways. Maybe it's on LinkedIn through our integration with La Growth Machine. You could do that end-to-end process in just a few minutes. That's why it would probably be a better 10x solution for someone like yourself or for another SMB. Also, more practically speaking, most SMBs and early stage startups don't want to hire SDRs. And so they can use Clay in a usage-based way for cheap and get started and use it to not only maybe test out their outbound messaging and do their original data enrichment, and then start to scale their outreach without having to hire manual SDRs. Now, for the bigger companies, it's a little different, right? Because for the bigger companies, they're already spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars on data. And so for them, we help them consolidate their tech stack so they don't have to manage lots of different vendors. We help them generally improve their data quality because we give them access to other data providers they don't have. And we also let them use LLMs in creative ways to improve their existing data points, as an example. And then we let them use the platform across their team, across marketing, across RevOps, to start automating different processes across their outbound campaigns, across their inbound campaigns, and even messaging their existing customers, so that just a small team of a couple of people can have way more impact than maybe the work of dozens of people beforehand.
I see. So for small companies, it has to do a lot with sort of being able to aggregate all this data in one place. So I don't have to go through all these different other data sources and try to get my answer. But for large companies, it seems like there's a bit more on the tasks you let them do with the data that they already have. Carrying through with the example, right? You bring in a list of emails, and now you can get kind of creative with what additional information you want to extract with these emails, right? Like, what do you want to learn about these people? How exactly can someone get creative on the platform? Like, is there a text interface? Is there, is it more of like, is there like a menu that you can choose from? You mentioned things about LLMs. How does that incorporate into all of this?
Yeah. So, and a lot of times, oftentimes people wouldn't even come with emails. Like you would, because you're a podcast host and run a newsletter. But a lot of times people will come with a blank slate and they're just wanting to find companies or people that make sense for their business.
Yeah.
And so, so from an LLM perspective, the interface is has both templates that you can choose from and freeform. And so everything is structured in the workflow, and you can kind of envision the product in kind of like a spreadsheet UI. So you can have like, list of companies, and then you can imagine the columns are giving you more information about those companies, and they're triggering API calls to other data providers that continue to give you more and more information. And then from an AI perspective, for our Claygent feature as an example, there are hundreds of templates that we have that give you, choices on saying, oh, I want to, get this specific piece of information, and give you ideas and inspiration on that. But also there's a free form area. So you could just be like, hey, here's a website. Go tell me if this business is, how many international locations this business has, right? Go tell me if on this website, this product is out of stock. So it could be anything, but we also have, predefined templates that make it easier for users to get started.
You've mentioned Claygent, which is the AI web scraper that you guys offer that can visit any website and sort of find an answer to a query and report it back. You also briefly touched on the waterfall enrichment, if I understand correctly, sort of sequentially tries, different data sources to find, say, an email or whatever you're searching for. I'd love for you to sort of expand exactly on what both of those technologies are.
Yeah. So Claygent, I think you got Claygent mostly right? Like it's an AI web researcher. It can go to any website, find information and answer most queries based on that. And there's kind of like a planning phase to it where it kind of plans the steps it needs to do, and then an execution phase after that. And then for the waterfall enrichment, generally that's right. So let's say you want to get a mobile phone number. Well, we have, 5 to 10 different providers to get you a mobile phone number, and you want to try them in like sequential order of cost. So you can try the cheapest one first, and then it kind of goes from there. Alternatively, you could try it in order of quality. So that's kind of how we might order it as well. And so basically, you can try it providers until you get the data points that you need.
I see. What are some of the interesting technical challenges that perhaps you guys had to overcome in building either Claygent or the waterfall enrichment?
I think there's a bunch of stuff that we could kind of go into here. So maybe on Claygent, how do you build an AI web scraper that can handle all sorts of different types of queries, and kind of also kind of constraining all the different places that it can get the data that it needs, right? So I think that's like an interesting challenge. Yeah, and by the way, when people are running these queries, like I said, it's a spreadsheet UI. So maybe people have 20 data points, 10,000 rows. That's 200,000 requests that we have to do as fast as possible for just one table for one customer. So that's like a performance challenge we have to overcome. For the waterfall enrichment, we were just talking about it, but it's like, how do you balance cost versus quality, right? How do you both get all these relationships with all these providers, keep them happy, organize them in the right way, in a way that feels transparent to customers, in a way that feels authentic to your brand, and order them and measure all of that. So I think there's lots of interesting kind of challenges we've kind of like thought through and overcome, ultimately with the hopes of building a great product for our customers.
Yeah, so we just discussed, Claygent, which is one of the AI tools that you guys offer. I'd love to hear about maybe some of the other ones that you guys are offering and how it's, powering your application to be so much better than the other offerings in the market.
Yeah, I think we've kind of applied AI as a means to an end in various different places in the product that might be surprising. So obviously, Claygent is a big application and is a huge driver of our growth and something customers find a lot of utility in. But there are a few other places I think are really interesting. So one, for example, is our AI formula generator. And at one point, in Clay's history, you could actually write JavaScript directly in Clay. And in order to do lots of different things, you would have to write JavaScript. And we actually built this as a way to kind of give our engineers a shortcut to unblock customers. Write this JavaScript so that you didn't have to build a feature. But over time, it kind of became this thing where in order to use Clay, you'd have to know JavaScript, which, as you can imagine, was very limiting. And then, fortunately, LLMs came along. And instead of just fixing the product and building all these features, what we did was we used LLMs to kind of translate natural language into JavaScript, actually. So we have like this formula generator where you can just be like, hey, here's a list of websites. I want you to remove this text, or I want you to manipulate the text in this way, or whatever you want to do. And, or I want you to organize this text in this way. And it'll just produce JavaScript that just does that, and it'll go do that for you. So it's kind of like a more unique application of AI in our product that helped us materially improve activation and help users get onboarded.
I guess the next question, which naturally leads from that, is what's sort of the why now for Clay? Like, is it the technology? Is it these AI features that you guys have added? Is it something in the market? Like we mentioned, there's a number of tools out there that sort of help with this. Why are they not implementing these features, or have they implemented these features?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I do think AI is a meaningful component, and I'd be remiss not to mention it. It obviously allows us to replace a lot of the manual research work that junior salespeople had to do before with Claygent or any of these other features that we've already discussed. But I do think there are a couple of other pieces, right? So one is kind of this aggregation of data piece. And because it's not our data and it's other people's data, we can have a different pricing model for it. It can be usage based. We don't have to lock people into these annual contracts. We can build an ecosystem around the data providers and help them continue to grow. I think another thing is we've taken a different approach than some of the other go-to-market tools. We decided to build a more powerful tool that targets technical users like growth marketers and RevOps people, whilst a lot of other tools target junior salespeople. And that allows us to build a more powerful product that centralizes complicated go-to-market workflows and frees up salespeople to focus on building relationships with their customers. So that I think is like a key difference in kind of how we've approached it. And then I think from a go-to-market angle, I think we've spent a lot of effort in building a real ecosystem around Clay. And this is actually something that maybe we can talk about, which is I would say there's like a pretty unique community and ecosystem around Clay, the product. And what I mean by that is, not only do we have maybe the normal things like 11,000 people in our Slack community or something like that, but there's actually boot camps that have been built, not by us, to teach people how to use Clay. There's newsletters just about Clay, not by us, by the way. We don't even have a newsletter. Other people have newsletters. And most importantly, there's agencies, colloquially called claygencies, that help customers get set up on Clay. And these claygencies, some of them are making more than $2 million a year, by the way.
Wow.
I mean, Usman, this is like a real money-making opportunity to start a claygency that no one is talking about. The demand is there and people are raking it in. And you don't see that. And maybe you saw that in the early days of the Salesforce or HubSpot, but you usually don't see that in B2B software products. So I think that's fairly unique as well.
Was all of this sort of customer obsession to the point where people are creating these agencies? Was there something you guys did intentionally, sort of forecasting this to happen?
I will say it's kind of our maybe original go-to-market motion. We had a horizontal product for a long time, and we kind of decided to focus on the sales and marketing use case. And one thing I did, basically, do you know that listserv called Modern Sales Pros?
No, I don't think I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Well, it's like this guy, Pete Kazanji, is like a famous like sales leader guy. He has this listserv and community called Modern Sales Pros. It has a bunch of sales leaders and salespeople on it. At one point, I just looked through the last 3 or 4 years of messages in that group, looking for people who had said anything smart about like data enrichment and outbound. And I found like 30 people who I thought said something smart about this topic in the last like 3 years. And I reached out to all of them and I'm like, hey, you said this thing. I thought it was smart. I'm building a product about this. Will you talk to me? And basically almost all of them agreed to chat. And they kind of ran the gamut from like sales leaders and marketing leaders to SDRs to marketing agencies to just junior marketing people. And the only people that had any idea what I was talking about were these agency owners. And it kind of made sense in retrospect because they're entrepreneurial, they are technical, they're building a business, and they feel the pain most acutely because they are doing data enrichment outbound across dozens of clients maybe. And so it makes sense that they felt the pain most acutely. And so that's why we started with them. And when we started with them, we started to create this flywheel. And again, it was at a small scale, but we would help them get onboarded. We would help them be successful. We would help them see value. And then a lot of these agency owners were already kind of posting content on LinkedIn to try and drum up interest about their own business. And then we helped them realize that content about Clay could be pretty lucrative for them. Both because it kind of positioned themselves, as this like expert pioneering this new way about this product that no one ever heard of, but also positioning themselves as an expert in being able to do this thing that everyone needs. And so that we would help them create this content, which then created this flywheel for people getting adopted into the product. And so that's kind of, we started with these agency owners, and a lot of them started to change their business models to be around Clay, which then enabled us to find more people like them, which then became a distribution channel, both through the content they created and also through their customers.
Oh, wow, that's very powerful. So you guys went to these agencies that were doing this work for customers and said, not only am I going to help you do this work a lot better, but I'll also arm you with content to advertise the work.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was now we say that, but a few years ago it was more like, "Hi, will you please talk to us? Here's a product that I think can help you. Let's see if there's anything that's mutually beneficial here." And then we would like eventually build up to it. But yeah,
And those agencies I hear are still running. So something
yeah.
worked. And so, going from these agencies to some of the names that we read earlier as your customers, right? Anthropic, Notion, Ramp. How did you guys land some of these folks?
It took a long time actually. And maybe even before we get to these bigger customers, it might be worth spending some time on how we even got out of agencies, I mean, it took almost 2 years to get from agency world and SMBs to actually getting real customers. It was painful because like a lot of times people would be like, "Hey, who are your customers?" And I'd be like, "Have you ever heard of Growth Engine X?" you know? And no, they had not. I would do these like very not scalable things. Like I would use these social listening tools. I used a tool called Siftin that would like listen for things on Slack and Reddit and would like ping me when like people mentioned a competitor or mentioned just having a problem in this area. And then I would immediately go pretend to be someone else and be like, "You should use Clay. And then a lot of growth people are in like these WhatsApp groups. Like there's a WhatsApp group called the SaaS Yacht Club as an example, or Sales Technicians. And so I would get in these WhatsApp groups and I would wait for people to say something about data or whatever. And I would just DM them privately and be like, "Hey, do you need this?" That's how we got some of our first customers. And then I would also, by the way, post a lot on LinkedIn. So I would post very consistently on LinkedIn. And through that, through the agencies, through their distribution, through their content, all of that kind of helped build this flywheel of getting us our first customers in SMBs. I would also leverage investors, not to get to any real customers, but to get to like early stage startups that just started using our product and stuff like that. And then over time, that kind of built into, so about like 6 months ago is really only when we started kind of going up market and looking at the middle market in a much more intentional way. And I wouldn't say we did anything materially different than what maybe lots of the startups do in our similar position, which is we lean on our investors or supporters of the product to make introductions to key decision makers at these big companies. But once we're there, it took some iteration on figuring out the right wedge in, the right positioning. And now we've kind of made that playbook much, much, much clearer.
Yeah. So it sounds like it was a lot of early hustle on your end and probably other members of the team sort of infiltrating these WhatsApp groups and different channels that exist. You also touched a lot about how you would sort of arm these agencies with content. You yourself were making content on LinkedIn. Where does the knack for content come from? It sounds like you have a pretty good hand at it. What's sort of the tips and secrets for others trying to play the same hand?
Well, I actually don't think I'm very good at it. I mean, in theory, maybe I should be better because you asked about prior experience, but I used to actually work in comms, like in communications, on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, which may or may not alienate me from 50% of your audience. But I don't think I'm that good at it, to be honest. I will say that like my North Star when I was creating content on LinkedIn was, how can I blow people's minds? That's all I was thinking about. What can I do in Clay that will literally blow someone's mind? So for example, one piece of content I created, and this didn't like go viral or anything, but like, maybe got several thousand impressions or something like that, was I was at a dinner with a few friends, and a couple of those people were pregnant women. And a conversation at dinner was how, in New York City, it was how to have your baby at a hospital where you're guaranteed a private delivery room. And of course, only in New York is this a problem to have a private delivery room when you're giving birth. But there's only one hospital in New York City that allows for this, and it's like Weill Cornell. It's on the Upper East Side. And I was like, oh, this is actually something that Clay can help with, because then I made like a content about it. And so what I did was I used our Google Maps scraper to go find all the OBGYNs in New York City. I pulled the Google Maps reviews, so I filtered those to just people who had above like 4.5 stars in Google Maps reviews. Some of the women at dinner only want to go to OBGYNs who are female, so I called the Genderize API to tell me if the OBGYNs are male or female. And then I scraped the OBGYN's website to see if they had admitting privileges into Wild Porno.
Oh,
And then I
wow.
had like a filtered list of OBGYNs that these women could, go to that had admitted privileges and were women and had good reviews.
Wow. Wow. And that made quite the impression when you posted this, I assume.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I didn't have that many followers. So, like, I think it got like 70 or 80 likes, which was big for me at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I was just like, how can I blow people's minds? And that's it. And just trying to be authentic to my voice. Now, there are other people on LinkedIn now, like Adam Robinson and a lot of other people who are making quite a name for themselves and are way better on LinkedIn than I am. But I think it's just like being authentic to who you are. And if you can blow people's minds, that's probably pretty good.
You also just mentioned that, you had this Google Maps integration. You have this gendered API. There's all these different tools that you guys have sort of built into the product to further enrich data. How do you guys sort of go about figuring out what tools to put in? Is there some direct feedback loop you have with customers? How do you guys decide this?
Yeah, so we now have more than 75 providers of the product. I would say in the early days, it was very much just like listening from customer feedback. And sometimes I'd be on a call. I actually even remember the call when a user requested like a map from Google Maps, and I was like, "Wow, that's a great idea. We should have that." and sometimes it's just as simple as that. And at other times, it's just like, so we have the Slack community, right? And we have like more than 10,000 people in it. So we ask them, and our users are quite vocal. Like they will tell us what data they need. And so we usually have a pretty strong pulse on it. Now it's evolved to the point where it's much more of a prioritized list. And we're trying to get through all of it. And we have well over 100 integrations that we'd like to build. But in the earlier days, it was very much just listening to what people wanted and just doing what felt most pressing in the moment. I think a lot of people would feel like, oh, let's have a prioritized list. Let's be super organized about it. But I would just say that, and I would say this about product, even in the early days too, it's just like, there's a lot of noise. If you feel it, just do what you feel. It's not important if you don't feel it. And usually the important things will break through the noise in the early days.
And sort of this number of integrations you guys have now, is this common with other players out there that sort of help with lead generation and create these lists, or not at all?
No. So I think this is a unique thing, right? So other providers will usually just have themselves. We're taking a very open ecosystem approach, and we want all of these players to win, and we want all of these providers to win and grow, and we're trying to help and enable that.
Yeah, the bundling sounds to be really powerful for you guys, and that's remarkable.
Hey, 1 to 100 will be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a B2B SaaS app, at some point, your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, SCIM provisioning, role-based access control, and audit trails. That's where WorkOS comes in, with easy-to-use and flexible APIs that help you ship enterprise features on day one, without slowing down your core product development. Today, some of the hottest startups in the world are already powered by WorkOS. These include Perplexity, Vercel, Jasper, and Webflow. WorkOS also provides a generous free tier of up to 1 million monthly active users for user management, making it absolutely the perfect authentication and authorization solution for growing companies. It comes standard with rich features like bot protection, MFA, roles and permissions, and more. If you're currently looking to build SSO for your first enterprise customer, you should consider using WorkOS. Integrate in minutes and start shipping enterprise plans today.
We were talking on the early days here. Your co-founder, Kareem, and you together make quite the founding team. I know you, prior to Clay, were the director of operations at Newfront, and Kareem was the VP of product at the Wall Street Journal. I'd love to kind of hear how you guys met. How did you decide to work on this? How did the idea form?
It's kind of funny. It was through a cold email, ironically enough. So Kareem actually started Clay several years ago with his best friend, Nikolai. And I didn't really join the story until a few years ago and kind of joined as a late co-founder. And basically, I kind of was in a Slack group. I was starting a company. I was in a Slack group about like no-code products. And someone was showing this product and was like, oh, let's do a webinar about Clay. And I showed up to the webinar, but I was the only one who showed up. No one else signed up. Or maybe other people signed up, but no one else showed up. It was just me. and they were kind of showing this product, and I was like, "Whoa, this is pretty interesting." And it was just an idea. It was just very early, but I was like, "Wow, this is really interesting," and I was just like hooked and really excited by it. And I cold emailed Kareem and Nikolai, and Kareem didn't respond. Classic. And Nikolai did though, and we hit it off. And I actually sent they were kind of still very horizontal, didn't have any commercial traction, no real customers. I just sent them like 20 customers. I was just like sending them all these people I just kept meeting. And I was like, I was just like, this is it. Like I can just see it. And I can see how this can help these people. And those people became like Clay's first paying customers. And then Nikolai, and the team was very small, it was like 5 or 6 people, but Nikolai and 2 or 3 of the other people in the company all decided to leave, all for different reasons. Nikolai, for example, is really passionate about crypto and ended up starting another company, also funded by First Round. And so then it was just Kareem and a couple of junior folks. And for some reason, I was like, "Sign me up. Let's walk through this burning door. I'm really excited about this." And so we kind of joined forces and kind of focused on this use case, and then kind of went from there.
Awesome. And obviously you guys are still building out that team, and it's much larger than a small team now. I think you guys are close to 50 employees. And so what sorts of values, principles, and people have you guys really prioritized and looked for as you're scaling this team? I mean, obviously, just by hearing the work you've done, I see a lot of hustle, but I'm curious what else is common amongst folks working at Clay.
Yeah. I would say I think we have a unique culture, and I think especially on the business team, like I've tried to make I maybe have a more unique hiring mindset. So we can go through a few of the things that I think are maybe more unique to us. So one big thing is I have a habit of hiring people who have no idea what they're doing. And I got this from Pat Grady at Sequoia, who said there's 2 ways you can think about hiring. There's DNA hires and there's resume hires. And almost everyone I've hired on the business team is a DNA hire. Oftentimes they've never done what we're asking them to do, but for one reason or the other, I believe that they can do it. And this is taking hold for lots of important functions. So we can go through a few examples. One is SEO. The person running SEO at Clay has never done SEO before, but is an engineer, is a designer, and very talented, and is running SEO and is like 23 years old and crushing it. And that kind of illustrates another principle, which is tight feedback loops. And we bring a lot of technical mindsets and technical disciplines to other business units, and SEO is maybe one small example of that. And it kind of illustrates this tight feedback loop principle, which is Pranav is an engineer. So he can not only have the idea about the SEO webpage or whatever, but he can also build it. So he's actually also building products on the website that can drive traffic, and that's all consolidated into one person. A similar concept applies on our support team. So we've hired engineers to do our support. And so, a lot of companies would outsource their support teams to India or the Philippines or something, but we think support is strategic. And so we hire engineers to do it, or, very smart people in the US who have technical mindsets because of the tight feedback loop. Because if a ticket comes in, they can fix the problem. And even if they can't fix it, they're going to build systems so that the problem doesn't come back again, or at least they'll be able to better communicate this problem to an engineer than a support agent in the Philippines probably could. Another example of this, and this will be the last one, I promise you, is like our sales team. So our sales team, we call them go-to-market engineers. None of them really, or very few of them have any sales experience. They're more like technical generalists. And the reason for that is we've noticed that the key skill set in selling Clay is not a sales skill set. It's a how great are you at Clay skill set, and how well can you communicate that to people. And so we've hired people who look a lot like our ICP to be our salespeople. And we've hired sales coaches to help them on the sales side. And the leader of this go-to-market engineering team is not a salesperson. His name is Everett, and he's a former engineer, he's a former founder, and he's a former head of growth. And he's bringing the disciplines and learnings from all of those different areas into sales.
Would you say that the team is pretty heavily technical? A lot of engineering backgrounds?
It's a very technical bent. I mean, even on the business team, which I'm responsible for, there's a lot of people with technical backgrounds. I aspire to be the least technical person in the company.
Wow, that's awesome. Moving on, looking into the future, how do you think about compounding advantages in the business? We've obviously talked about a lot of really cool tools and features you guys have built, but how does it all put together ensure that Clay gets stronger over time?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different directions we can go in here. A lot of reasons why I think we'll have compounding advantages. One thing we've already talked about is kind of this ecosystem, right? And so if you are building intentionally an ecosystem of agencies maybe that are dependent on your business, then that just increasingly becomes harder for competitors to kind of interfere with. That's, I think, a big thing. That also kind of ties into the content that they create, right? Because that just creates this flywheel that's really, really hard to stop. And as long as we're listening to what they're saying and improving it and working very closely with them, I think that'll continue to grow. I also do think there's a lot more that we plan to do to enable our data partners and helping them grow and helping them fix their data and improve their data and helping them get better products and build better products. And so I think these are all different things that we'll continue to invest in and continue to kind of enable these compounding advantages to continue spinning.
Yeah. And could you expand on that second part a little bit? How exactly are you guys helping your different data partners in improving their data?
Yeah, well, there's a few pieces here, but we're effectively kind of the distribution for these data providers, and we help them. So again, we could use you as an example. You could start a data company, but you wouldn't really know where to get started, right? You wouldn't know how to find your customers, and maybe bigger customers wouldn't work with you because of security concerns. But they'll work with Clay, and we can help you with your sales and marketing and your distribution while you can just focus on your product. And we can get information about your data and share that back with you so that you can improve your product. And we can share leads with you and stuff like that. And we can do co-marketing with you and stuff like that can help you continue to grow your business so that our relationship continues to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, a thing we'd like to touch on is there's obviously other players in the space. And they're, like we mentioned, they're focusing on different parts of the sales prospecting pipeline, right? LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Apollo, MailChimp, etc. One, I'd love to sort of have you map out sort of how you sort of see the space and how does Clay, beat out these guys or at least stand out from them?
Again, I think it's a little less about beating these other guys, and I think it's a massive market, and I think it's a bit more about our approach and a bit more about our philosophy, which is one of creativity. It's one of helping people take their creative growth ideas and turn them into reality, and giving people a platform to enable people to do that. And I think that's just a different objective and a different goal than what a lot of those other providers are trying to do. And so I think we're going after different things. And I don't necessarily see them as kind of going after the same thing. And we're going after more technical people and building a more complex product that serves those people's needs, as opposed to maybe Sales Navigator, which is targeting, junior salespeople, or Apollo, which is also targeting SDRs. So I think we're just going after different things fundamentally.
Yeah. And how does sort of going after different things, or in your case, going after more technical people, result in sort of like different features? Like, how does that concretely manifest itself that you guys are going after technical folks while perhaps these people aren't?
Well, it's a different user and it's a different ICP, right? And so if you're going after, what Sales Nav is doing, right, is they're taking the existing workflow and trying to make it more efficient. We're assuming that a new workflow will be created. And we're kind of seeing the early signals of that. And I think that's reflected in our growth and our traction. And we're trying to enable a different workflow where there is a centralized operational team that's kind of orchestrating all of this work on behalf of the sales team. And so it's just a different user that you're building for ultimately.
Maybe diving here a little bit further, an example could be pretty helpful, I feel, for the audience about, what is something that these more technical folks can sort of get done at Clay more efficiently or more effectively than they couldn't, say, using LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Yeah. So, to use Sales Nav as an example, with Sales Nav, if you were to buy it for your company, you'd have to buy 200 seats for your 200 reps. But with Clay, studies show that 67% of an SDR's time is not spent selling. And revenue leaders are trying to get that down, obviously. And so with Clay, you could instead have your RevOps team orchestrate all this work that your salespeople are currently doing on manual research and data enrichment and things like that, so that the salespeople can focus on selling. And so I think it's just a fundamentally different approach and different workflow.
The final question we have is, what do you think the future of AI-enabled sales prospecting looks like? Where does Clay go from where it is today?
I think it's just a very, very creative future. And I think it's going to enable lots of different exciting possibilities for salespeople, for growth people. And I think, it's just crazy that we're in 2024 and there's so much information out there to help companies find customers who care about what they're selling. But instead, companies are sending poorly researched messages to the wrong people and doing all this manually. And so we're trying to change that. And with Clay, we're trying to help any business kind of access all the information they need to find the right customers. And we're trying to build a future where people can apply their creative ideas, turn them into growth campaigns almost instantly, and let salespeople focus on building deep human relationships.
And I know Clay is hiring. Any sort of shout outs for the types of roles you guys are hiring for, folks who are looking for, people out there looking for jobs or looking for new work who should tune in to Clay?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're definitely hiring engineers. So please reach out if you're a mid-level or senior engineer. We're hiring for senior product designers. And then on the go-to-market side, we're always hiring for people who are good at Clay. And that could mean many things, right? So if you're good and passionate about Clay, you could work in a support role. You could work in the customer success function. You could become a go-to-market engineer if you want to do sales to companies like Anthropic or Notion. And we're also looking for talent. We're looking for a head of finance. We're looking for an events and community lead. So we're really hiring across the board. So if you're passionate about Clay, you should just reach out. And I'm just Varun at clay.com. That's VARUN at clay.com. If you're passionate about Clay and you're excited, just reach out. Especially if you're good at Clay, we'll find a good role for you.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everyone to check out clay.com and use the tool. It's honestly really amazing. I've played around with it a bit, but thank you, Varun, so much for doing this. Until next time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Usman.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of 1 to 100. Please send it to any talented operators looking to join their next company. Ratings and reviews are extremely helpful for a new podcast, and you can let us know which other companies you'd like us to profile. 1 to 100 is a podcast from the Why You Should Join newsletter and Turpentine, the podcast network behind the Econ 102, Complex Systems with Patrick McKenzie, Turpentine VC, and more shows for experts by experts in tech.